Over the course of this lecture, we'll talk in depth about sex. However, even though most people experience sexual motivation and attraction, some people don't. Since I'll be providing lots of information about sexuality in this lecture, I also want to recognize that about 1% of the population identifies as asexual, otherwise known as ace. So asexual individuals don't experience sexual attraction towards others, or they experience very little of it. If you've ever watched BoJack Horseman, then you know that Todd identifies as asexual. I'll admit, I don't know much about asexuality. Since one of my main areas of research is human sexuality, I'm trying to expand my knowledge of asexuality and other various sexualities. Recently, I picked up this book that's featured on the PowerPoint. So far, it's been really helpful for me in my journey to understand asexuality. So if you're interested in reading more on the topic, I recommend checking out this book. Sexual behaviors are driven in part due to our sex hormones. So the main one for males is testosterone, and the main one for females is estrogens. Over the course of our life, hormonal surges and declines can affect our sexual drive. So the first surge occurs during puberty, when we develop our sex characteristics and our sexual interests. Then later in life, our sex hormone levels fall. Women experience menopause as their estrogen levels decrease, while men experience a more gradual change. Some may also experience hormonal changes due to surgery or drugs. For example, if an adult male is castrated, then their sex drive typically falls as testosterone levels decline. In the 1960s, a study occurred to look at how humans experience sexual response. So this study resulted in what we call the sexual response cycle. This cycle has 4 stages. The first is excitement. In this stage, the genital area becomes engorged with blood. This causes a woman's clitoris and a man's penis to swell. A woman's vagina expands and secretes lubricant, and her breasts and nipples might enlarge. The second stage is called plateau. So this is when excitement peaks as breathing, pulse, and blood pressure rates continue to increase. So a man's penis becomes fully engorged. Some fluid, frequently containing enough live sperm to enable conception, may appear at its tip, and a woman's vaginal secretions continue to increase and her clitoris retracts. The third stage is orgasm. So this is when muscle contractions appear all over the body and are accompanied by increased breathing, pulse, and blood pressure rates. The pleasurable feeling of sexual release is pretty similar for both sexes. The final stage is resolution. So the body gradually returns to its unaroused state as the genital blood vessels release their accumulated blood. For men, this happens relatively quickly if orgasm has occurred, relatively slowly otherwise. Men then enter a refractory period that lasts from a few minutes to a day or even more, during which they're incapable of another orgasm. And then a woman's much shorter refractory period may enable her, if re-stimulated during or soon after resolution, to have more orgasms. So sexual dysfunctions are problems that consistently impair sexual arousal or functioning at any point in the sexual response cycle. So some can involve sexual motivation, like a lack of sexual energy or arousability. For men, a common dysfunction is erectile dysfunction. This is the inability to have or maintain an erection. And then for women, female orgasmic disorder may be a dysfunction. This is distress over infrequently or never experiencing orgasm. And about 4 in 10 American women report experiencing a sexual problem, such as orgasmic disorder or low sex drive. Sexual dysfunctions can be treated using both psychological and medical therapies. For men, Viagra can help with erectile dysfunction. Unfortunately for women, researchers have really struggled to develop a medication that can treat female sexual interest or arousal disorder. Paraphilia it's not always a sexual disorder. Paraphilia is when people experience sexual desire, but they direct it in unusual ways. It's only a disorder if it entails harm or risk of harm to others, or if a person experiences distress from an unusual sexual interest. Psychology can also influence our sexual motivation. So external stimuli can consist of the things we see, hear, or read. Sexual arousal can be both pleasing and disturbing, depending on the person's perceptions. The more we're exposed to erotic stimuli, the emotional response lessens, and we begin to habituate to it. So think back to like the 1800s, when anything above the ankle would have been considered immodest. Now, we don't think twice about seeing someone's calf. Our brains are one of our most excellent sex organs. How we use our imagination can influence our sexual desire and our arousal. So sexual fantasies are totally normal. Justin Lehmiller has a book on the biggest study of sexual fantasies. It's a well-written book with lots of information that helps destigmatize sexual fantasies. He goes over the 7 most common sexual fantasies. For example, the most common sexual fantasy that people experience is multi-partner sex. Our sexual orientation describes the direction of our sexual attractions. So what gender we're attracted to or whom we're attracted to. You're likely familiar with certain sexual orientations, such as gay, bisexual, straight, and lesbian. However, there are lots of other sexual orientations that a person can have. For example, there's pansexual, which is when sexual attraction isn't restricted to any sex or gender identity. Sexuality can be fluid. For example, as we talked about earlier in the semester, women are a bit more sexually fluid and maybe more likely to be bisexual as they age. However, most researchers agree that sexual orientation is something that isn't easily changed, and it can't be willfully changed. We're attracted to whom we're attracted to. When comparing the brains of gay and straight people, there's a few noteworthy differences. For one, dissecting the brains of individuals led us to uncover that straight men have a larger cell cluster in the hypothalamus than straight women and gay men did. Compared with straight men and women, gay men appear on average more female typical in brain pattern responses, and lesbians are somewhat more male typical. Looking at sexual orientation from a genetic perspective, we can see that same-sex attraction runs in families. Identical twins are somewhat more likely than fraternal twins to share a same-sex orientation. However, other factors could also be at play that could influence this. Studies on fruit flies have shown that we can alter their sexual orientation if we alter a certain gene. Human research has found that there appears to be a link between sexual orientation and 2 genes on chromosomes 13 and 14. However, human traits are influenced by many genes having small effects. So we can only say that there's a link between these genes, not that they're causing people to be gay. Interestingly, sexual orientation may be linked to maternal genetics. So gay men tend to have more gay relatives on their mother's side than on their father's side. Research has shown that females who are exposed to testosterone during fetal development appear more likely to have gender atypical traits and to experience same-sex desires. Research has also shown that the mother's immune system may play a role in the development of sexual orientation. So men with older brothers are more likely to be gay, and that rate increases for each additional brother that they have. So it might be that the mother's immune system has a response to foreign substances produced by male fetuses.